Today, so this Eagle Act, which is going to be voted on today in the House, I hope, that's the news that we heard, was introduced in the House in June of last year, and its EAGLE stands for Equal Access to Green Cards for Legal Employment Act of 2021. So that's EAGLE acronym. So this was introduced by a representative of the House from California, Democrat, called Zoe Lofgren. Now he's the same person, by the way, who introduced the previous bill that we had on this matter, but we'll talk about that later. So the bill seeks to equalize green card backlogs by eliminating per country caps for employment-based visas. So as I said, right, there's a 7% cap on each country, and that's it's very unfair because some have more demand and some don't even use up the numbers that are given to them. So this bill also has some provisions reforming the H-1B specialty occupation program, and also gives some flexibility for those already in the US and are stuck in the green card backlog. So, so it's very similar to, this bill is very similar to the Fairness for High Skilled Workers Act, which, if those of you who recalled, who've been, watching this news closely, was introduced in 2019 again by the same person who introduced this bill, Representative Lofgren, and it actually passed the House, and then there were a lot of negotiations and compromises made in the Senate, and it was amended 4 times. I'm talking about the Fairness to High Skilled Workers bill.
Right.
And by the time it was time to again bring it back to the House and pass the revised version, unfortunately the time was out because, it was the end of the year, and the 116th Congress session had closed. So they would have had to then start all over again. So they didn't do that. So instead now they've pretty much introduced a very similar bill, and it's called EAGLE Act instead of Fairness for High Skilled Immigrants, but the provisions are pretty much the same. Let's go through the provisions quickly. One is phase out of per country caps, so that's 7% caps for employment-based green cards. They want to remove it completely so that, it's first come, first serve. And so everyone who waits, so some people don't have to wait for decades to get their green card, while others, get their green cards as soon as they're filed. This would also raise instead of removing the caps completely, it would increase the cap for the family-based green card from 7% to 15%. Employment-based, excuse me, it removes the cap completely. But before they remove the cap completely, there's going to be a transition period. Now they're concerned that suddenly the rest of the world who has never had backlogs or has, insignificant backlogs in the past, not as significant as India or China, they don't suddenly find themselves heavily backlogged. So in order to transition it, they have said that they will do it slowly. So they will wait for a period of 9 years to ensure that applicants from the rest of the world, kind of phase it in slowly. So in the first year, they will increase it by 30%. They will make a reservation for rest of the world for 30% of the cases. They'll reserve it. Then it's 25% the next 3 years, and then 20% in the last 3 years, and then they'll phase it out completely. So they reserve a certain number of numbers for the rest of the world, so they don't suddenly get completely backlogged. And at the end of the 9 years, they'll remove that reservation completely. So it's a phased-in approach. Also, what they're going to do, or what they want to do, is provide a new status for some non-immigrant visa holders that are waiting for green cards. So a lot of now during this phase-out period of 10 years, a lot of people might still face, Indian nationals and Chinese nationals might still face a backlog, and they might still have to wait for years and years before their 485 can be filed. So what they would do is just they're filing a perm, filing an I-140, and just sitting tight. And sometimes, so they have to continue to be on H1 for that period of time. And it's very onerous to be on H1 for such a long period of time because the H1 rules are very, very strict, and are very, heavily favor employers and don't really favor the employee. So they're providing a new status, which would be called early filing or early adjustment of status. And this would permit individuals to get all the benefits of a 485 filing, but not actually get the green card. So they would be able to travel more easily, perhaps using advanced parole instead of having to go to the consulate for a visa every time, and get rejected, then they won't even be able to come back into the country. So to avoid that, they will be given expanded travel rights. They will, applicants on who have filed their I-140 and who've been waiting for at least 2 years would get these benefits. They would also be allowed to change employers, and same way that people who presently have a 485, they are able to change. These people will be able to change also. So it gives you puts you on par with the people who have filed a 485, but doesn't, and so it's better than being on a H1. So it's a little bit of a relief for them. And also, most importantly, allows dependents to have the same flexibility and prevents children from aging out. Right now, most children who are not born in the US are aging out because their parents are not getting a green card before they turn 21 because it's taking so many years. And they are finding themselves having to go back on an F1 and then go through the entire process themselves, even though they've waited most of their lives. They've filed a petition, their parents have filed, and they waited, but they'll have to start all the way from the beginning. Another program would be the H1B program. They always, when they give benefits, they like to take away some things. So the negative connotation for this bill would be the restriction on H1s. They're talking about basically H1 employers having to advertise on the Department of Labor website before they file a H1. They can only do it then if they don't get any responses, almost like a green card. And employers who have more than 50 people in their company, so those employers who have over 50 employees and 50% of their employees are on H1, they will not be allowed to file H1s, something like that. So they're carving out these restrictions. Let's hope that part doesn't come through and the good parts come through. And they're also carving out some benefits for nurses, because right now there's no real way for nurses to come into the US. So they're creating a program for nurses to come in, which is great because of the shortage in healthcare and the necessity because of COVID. So that's the Eagle bill, and we don't know yet with reference to the voting. I will keep you updated on what happened with reference to the voting in the next segment.